hello everybody, and welcome to episode 501 of Constructed Criticism. That's right, this is the longest running constructed podcast in the history of Magic the Gathering, and I'm joined by a special guest to celebrate. It's Greg Michael. What's up, Greg?
Hey, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on 500 episodes. That is incredible.
It's pretty crazy. It's honestly weird. Like, I remember when we hit 400 a couple years ago, and I was like, that's not a real thing. I remember when they did episode 249 of or 241 of Limited Resources, and they did their 2-for-1 special where they did 2 episodes in one day, and I thought it was like so cool. And I was like, man, it'd be crazy if we ever got to like a moment like that. And it's like, oh, don't worry, buddy. You're just gonna do this your whole life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we'll talk about this a bit, but I've been doing Twitch streaming, and I do it about 4 times a week. And even at that rate, I mean, it's been going for well over a year, but I don't think we're anywhere near that number. And I don't know, we don't number them, so who knows how many streams we've done. But
I'm excited to have you here. I wanted to do a cross promotion. I love your guys' stream. And we're going to get into that. Before we do, I just want to say that if you want to support the show directly, head over to patreon.com/ccmg to become a patron of the show. It's the best way to support the show. The show will always be free. But, if you want bonus episodes, if you want access to our Discord, things like that, head on over, check that out. And then also, you can support the show by checking out our sponsors. I actually have a present for you here, Greg.
Oh my God.
This will be in the mail for you.
Yes.
Here, probably. I had a really rough month, so I haven't sent it out yet. But Mana Candles was kind enough to sponsor us, and I know that you love candles, so we're gonna send one of those.
I do love candles. I'm very excited. I will show it off on stream. I promise.
Our other sponsor, Heavy Play, use the code CCMG, get 10% off at checkout, and then we're also an affiliate of Untapped GG. I use Untapped GG all the time. I think that it is so helpful when you're trying to practice a deck, understand your outs, and practice playing to your outs, to be able to look up your deck in real time, the percentages that you have to hit, different things, and help you make decisions. It's really great for Constructed, and I swear by them. So
yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know if people have had that experience of when you play Moto for the first time, you kind of visualize the stack.
Yeah.
In a way that you've maybe never visualized it. And then when you go back to playing in paper, you're like, you kind of have a new understanding of the stack, which can help you out as you're playing, and a new way to visualize. I found the same thing with Untapped GG, just to sell your sponsor. When I get to look at my deck, then I'm not used to thinking, okay, how many cards are in my deck? What's there? What exactly is in there? That's not always going through my mind. But when I see it on people's streams, and then I come back, sometimes in paper, I can kind of just make a slight mental image of what the Untapped GG thing looks like, and that can be really helpful even when you're playing in paper.
I love it. See, it sells itself, man. I don't know. Yeah, if you click the affiliate link and sign up, we get a kickback, and it's really appreciated. Let's dive right into the main topic, though. You might notice we didn't do Always Improving this week, and the reason is because we're talking about growth mindset today, and they have a lot in common. And Greg, I love your stream so much, and I just wanted to invite you on to do a cross promotion, but I kind of just want to introduce you as well. People may know you as the guy that won the Black Lotus here in wonderful Salt Lake City a few years back. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2022, the Magic Summit tournament, the first ever Magic Summit tournament happened, which was a really cool event. It was kind of right as tournament Magic was starting up again after various pandemic restrictions were being lifted. And it was probably the closest thing I've played to a classic GP since the pandemic. It was a huge tournament. It was a pre-release GP. It was pre-release limited of the Brothers War. And it had about 1,300 people in it, and tons of people came up. They advertised it really well. There were a lot of people there, a lot of well-known people in the Magic community. And to incentivize the event, they put a Black Lotus for first place, which actually drew a lot of people, both the Black Lotus and the idea of pre-release limited. And it was right after we started streaming, and I decided to go with a bunch of friends, and I won the tournament, which was unbelievable and super fun. And I still have my Black Lotus. I got a nice frame for it. It's kind of hanging out in my apartment, and
is that
so that was
in your apartment?
I think it might be. It's. I mean, like my car, I guess.
Yeah.
Is more expensive, but it's close actually.
It's not in your apartment.
Yes, that's true. It's not literally in the apartment. But
You mentioned the stream a few times. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those who don't know, I am one of the two co-hosts of the System Magic Twitch stream. So you can find us at twitch.tv/systemmagic. It is me and my good friend Andrew Ellenbogen, who is a former Pro Tour champion. He won Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica in 2018. The two of us stream most times late at night, but we sometimes stream at random other times. And we focus on being competitive players who stream. We're both competitive grinders. We both travel to tournaments. We both play in RCQs and RCs, and we both have a lot of experience on the PT. And our goal is to be the stream for you if you are looking to go to your local game store and win an RCQ next weekend. We try to keep on top of the meta. We mostly play stock decks. We try and play the best decks in the format. We try to have fun in other ways, but there are a lot of streamers out there kind of trying weird and wacky and wild brews. That's not usually our thing. We've been playing a lot of Is It Phoenix and Pioneer and Rakdos Vampires and the Esper midrange and Dimir and Standard and some of the other top decks. And it's been a ton of fun. We have a great time. We have a good rapport with the two of us. There are a lot of people who will come in and chat. So if you're ever up late and want to come check us out, you can do that. You can also watch the VODs. We also have a YouTube channel where we kind of just post the VODs on a bit of a delay to YouTube, but you can go check them out there.
But then they're there forever on like Twitch.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I get nostalgic and go back and watch really old streams.
So I really love this kind of the birth of your stream because it's kind of like the birth of this podcast. I remember sitting. It was back when I was working at Oasis Games, local game store here in Utah, and I was like, man, I wish there was just a podcast that I could listen to that would just tell me what 8 decks to prepare to for my local PTQ. I could build those decks. I could figure it, like, just listen and maybe talk about getting better at Magic and like just learn instead of kind of the where Magic podcasting was 10 years ago. And hearing you talk about like, oh yeah, there's lots of streams of people playing. If you got Misplaced Ginger, if you want to learn Black Red, go to his stream. If you've got, but then you've got people playing brews like
Firing Spike or even like Saffron Olive or,
But, knowing that you found what you thought you would want to watch and then just doing that, I think it always makes the best content.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, I don't want to demean any of those other streamers. They all produce excellent content that I go and watch from time to time, but this is
I think they're allowed to demean Misplaced Ginger on this podcast specifically. But I don't do it because I don't know him like that. But Mason and Abe do it all the time. So that's
fine. I don't know him. He like raids us sometimes and always has a big crowd, and we raid him sometimes. So we got to keep that rapport up, And of the two hosts of my stream, I'm not the one to dagger other people. Sure. That would be my lovely co-host Andrew.
So that's something you mentioned when we were preparing for the show, that you're the kind of the nonsense guy. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a good. So kind of our dynamic when we started out was that Andrew was the Pro Tour champion and I was kind of his friend. I hadn't won Summit yet. I'd been to the Pro Tour a few times, but I was a relative unknown. And we kind of started out with this dichotomy of strategy and nonsense. And even though we were playing stock decks and kind of wanted to take it really seriously, it's also a Twitch stream. It's entertainment. We want to have fun. And we work really hard to make sure our streams are silly and a good time. And so kind of at the beginning, Andrew was in charge of strategy. I was in charge of nonsense. Our name kind of became synonymous with this. The System Magic. Kind of system was the strategy part, and then magic was the fun and nonsense. And admittedly, the canon is a little inconsistent on Andrew being the strategy and me being the nonsense. Sometimes the roles are kind of in flux, but we work really hard to kind of bring both into our stream.
So, and why do you think that is important? Like, why do you think the nonsense matters? I mean, I have Mason Clark as a co-host, so I understand that nonsense can matter.
Absolutely. So I think that at the end of the day, it's really important at least for me personally, to remember that competitive Magic the Gathering is my hobby. This is something that I choose to do with my time because I find it fun. I have a lot of friends to do it with, and there are a million different games out there, a million different hobbies we can do, but we've all chosen this one for whatever reasons we have. And I think it's really important. Sometimes when you're in the competitive grind, you can really wear yourself down. You can start to take it too seriously. You can start to get demoralized. You can start to get upset with yourselves. And we're going to be talking about some of that stuff later in the stream. But I think that remembering the joy, remembering the fun is a really key part of the game. And for me, it's been a key part of my success in Magic. And when I've been able to not take myself as seriously and really enjoy this game that I'm playing, that I get to go play now every night on stream, that's kind of when I do the best. I don't think it's a coincidence that I started the stream and was having a ton of fun playing Magic every night, and then I went to my first big tournament and I won the whole thing. It's because I was in a really positive place with Magic in my life. And of course there are other factors, but that was a big part of it. And so
I love that.
And it can feel like a job sometimes. When you're preparing for RCQs, it can be a lot of work. Fine-tuning your deck list, writing your sideboard guide, deciding which deck to play, testing with different people. Like, that's a lot of work. And when it starts to feel like work, that's, for me, not the best. And when you can remember to take a step back and have fun with it, that's ideal. Fun is not just for the Commander players.
I agree. I want to talk to you kind of about, you've mentioned kind of your history in Magic a little bit, but I'd love to kind of talk about it. You sent me a text that I thought was really funny, and I have never told a story on this podcast, and I'm going to tell a story. We both share taking last place in an important tournament to us.
Really?
I've literally never told this story on the podcast in 500 episodes. But
go on, you tell yours, I'll tell mine.
The first state championship I ever played in Utah, I took dead last. I think I went 0-7, and just played it because it was my first time ever doing it. And I think it was one of the things that made me fall in love with bigger tournaments. I had only played in weeklies before that, little locals. And what's so funny is the next year I went on to top 8 and conceded in the semifinals to my friend of states, and the next year after that, after my friends made fun of me, I went on to win states. And
awesome.
I literally don't think that happens if I don't take dead last at a Utah State Championship. Your stage was a little bigger.
Yeah, so a joke that we have occasionally told on my stream is that the two co-hosts both have an extreme Pro Tour result on them. And look, at every Pro Tour, only 2 people can have an extreme result. The person who comes in first and the person who comes in literal last. And my in-person Pro Tour results are quite good. I've day 2'd every Pro Tour I've been to. I'm over 500, except when the pandemic hit, I was qualified for the next Pro Tour. I kind of spiked an a PTQ that qualified me for the next Pro Tour. And then, obviously, that event was canceled because of COVID. And honestly, I was not someone who played Magic Online. I didn't have Magic Online or Magic Arena installed on my computer. I just much prefer paper Magic. And so this tournament hit, and I practiced a little bit, but I had played so little online Magic in my life. And it was the pandemic. Things were not going well in anyone's life, really. But I had a lot of stress and a lot of worry, and I was playing a deck that was not particularly my style of deck. And I wasn't surrounded by people. I'm a really social person, and having to be in a room by myself to play a Magic tournament was just not very effective for me. And so, and some other stuff happened. I drew really poorly. I lost all my matches, and I 0-4 dropped. My 4 opponents, between them, had a combined 4 match wins, which were all against me. So all my opponents only beat me and lost to everyone else. And look, you can control your destiny to come in first. If you just win literally every single match, you'll come in first. But coming in last, you actually can't control your destiny. Even if you lose all your matches, you're not a lock to come in literal last place.
You could go 0-8 and actually have better tiebreakers than going 0-4.
Definitely, absolutely. And so So yeah, my only memory from this tournament is playing this game against Mono Red, where I believe both of us just had 7 lands in hand. Because I remember passing the turn with 7 lands, and I just like
no, this is after Chain Whirler.
Well, anyway, my opponent, who was someone I vaguely knew, tanks at the end of my turn 6 after I passed and with nothing. They tank, cast Embercleave with no creatures in play for a full 6 mana. Because they had nothing else going on. I had nothing else going on. And it was just like not a show of strength, but it didn't matter because my hand was 7 lands. And then there's a funny picture on Twitter somewhere way back when of this board state.
I want to jump back to something that you said about being a social person, because I think that, you know, if there's anything I've learned from the listeners of this podcast and doing this in the time that I've done it, is that sometimes you just, different situations, you do better or worse than them, and it's not always your fault. I was a person that did not do well in the pandemic. I literally quit this podcast, gave it over to Mason for a year and a half during that time, and it was a struggle for me. And I've been sick for a couple weeks, and I was talking to my coworker today on a video call, and I was like, I am so excited to go into the office tomorrow. Like, and people are like, why would you be excited about it? I work better that way. This is my magic desk. This is my man cave. Like, I don't want to be in here to do work all the time. And I'm kind of curious, like, how did you know that about yourself before this Pro Tour, that, like, maybe this wasn't the best environment for you personally to succeed in?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, me and some friends actually made we set up a Discord call room for just all of us to go in once our Pro Tour matches were done. Like, it was just like, when you're done, just come into this Discord room and we'll all chat. And it was nowhere close to the same. Like, I thought it would make it better, but like, I only knew like 2 or 3 of the people, and there were like 12, and people were like playing code names and some other like board games, which is fine, but like not what I wanted when I'm like playing a serious Magic tournament. I wanted to like focus, and I was just kind of like, I don't know, it didn't help. I actually went into my old office. I asked if I could come in for the day because I had an event that I needed to attend. I did not tell them it was a Magic tournament. I kind of implied it was a work conference, but it wasn't. And so it was the last time I ever went into that office. But I was like sitting in this like old office. None of my coworkers were there. No one was in the entire building except me. I'd gotten special permission, and it was just like so depressing. I don't know. And then, you know, I was losing a lot. But I mean, to turn the story around, one of the reasons I got into competitive Magic was that I kind of felt like I needed an outlet in my life where I could be social, and I started going to, you know, weekly draft nights. I started going to more serious tournaments. I started going to PPTQs because it was a fun thing to do with friends over the weekend. And then I started winning. Then I started traveling to GPs, and, you know, it all kind of went from there. But at the end of the day, it was kind of a social outlet for me that has turned into this kind of lifelong hobby.
You know, as somebody that's streamed before and that has this similar feeling, I'm kind of curious, like, do you find that getting to do your stream with Andrew is a way that you can stream and create content that you never would have done before?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a tiny bit of streaming experience from before. I actually streamed for a short while with Megan and Maria from the Good Luck High Five podcast. Shout out to them. They're excellent. And there was a while where they were trying to build their Twitch stream, and they asked some of their friends to do nightly streams. And so for a short while, I was streaming every Thursday on their channel. And the reason I stopped is because it was pretty lonely. I would just kind of go to their office on Thursday, and from like 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., I was just going to sit by myself and play Magic. And people would watch. We had a decent audience. People would chat. But like, it got to the point where I just like, it was too lonely to sit in the room by myself. And absolutely, one of my favorite things about my current stream is having a co-host where we work so closely. And
okay, keep going.
Yeah, where we work so closely and we just kind of bounce off each other at all times and bring different energies. And, you know, sometimes one of us is more excited than the other, and that really helps it work. And especially for me and Andrew, who is also a pretty social person.
Yeah.
So it works well for both of us.
I love that. Former host of this show, Quentin Pierce, he and I did a stream called Think Twice, where it was very similar to your guys' stream. where it was back when there were dailies, and we would stream dailies, and we called it Think Twice because we would bounce off each other in the same room. So that's great.
Yeah, system magic came from we're both very mathematical people, and we both tend to be kind of systematic in how we think, hence the pun system magic. But as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of become this analog for kind of the dual nature, the strategy nonsense separation in our stream. System magic.
I love it.
I love it.
So let's go into kind of the broader topic now that people know you. And one thing that I used to do, there's kind of like different phases. I'm going to give you a little CCMTG history, Greg. There are different phases of guests on CCMTG. You have the first round of guests, which our first guest was episode 12, Ali Antrazi talking about, building rogue decks, right? Episode 13 was John Finkel, and that was like, oh, okay, we're here. And then we had PVDR and Alexander Hayden, so we had some of the greatest minds of Magic, and then slowly, like as we did the show, more and more people wanted to be on the show, and I kind of had a rule that I had to believe for a while that somebody had something to offer to the listeners that they themselves believed really hard in, that they could share. And so when you told me yours, and I don't remember what I asked you, but I was like, what is the thing that you feel like you could share with the listeners? You were pretty excited about your answer. I want you to talk about it.
First, I'll give the caveat, and I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but I'm kind of the type of person that's excited about everything I talk about.
That makes for better podcasting.
I have a lot of enthusiasm, and we'll definitely get into this as we talk about, as we go in. But I think I really wanted to spend this time talking about, which I know is a topic that you and your listeners have explored in the past, is basically the idea of kind of living with a growth mindset versus living with a fixed mindset. And this is an idea that is talked about all over in all sorts of different fields, and it's becoming more and more pervasive. I think it started in educational fields, but has really grown and spread from there. So for those who don't know, maybe I'll just start by talking about what those two terms mean. And it's easier, I think, to start with a fixed mindset. So I think maybe I'll start with an example. So like, we're all gamers probably. An experience we've probably all had is trying to teach a game to someone who's not that into games. And even if it's a simple game, like, I don't know, Code Names or Settlers of Catan or something with like not many rules, not that many cards, like relative to other board games, pretty simple. And you may have had this experience where you're starting to teach a friend a game, and at some point they're just like, oh, I'm just not a game person, or oh, this is so many rules, or something like this, where they just kind of totally deflect and shut down. And a lot of times, if this person continues playing, they will not have a good time. And whenever anything bad happens, they'll say, oh, I'm so bad at games. Oh, I can never understand rules. And this person is having a bad time. They're probably not succeeding in the game. And it's actually not because of their ability. It's not because of their understanding or knowledge of the rules. The thing that's keeping them from having a good time with this game and from succeeding, from learning the rules and such, is their mindset. Is that they kind of have this preconceived notion that they're not going to have a good time. And instead of challenging that and moving forward and trying to circumvent it, they just shut down and say, okay, well, I'm not going to have a good time, so I'm not going to have a good time. And then it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I mentioned this comes from educational circles. I have a big background in math education, and this happens in math classes a lot. Whether or not you teach math, you've probably heard many people say, I'm not a math person, or I never succeed in math. And you see someone who, is starting to understand things, and suddenly they hit the first snag and say, oh, I'm just so bad at math, I could never do this. And it's kind of all over. They've given up hope. And now whenever anything gets in the way, rather than trying to push through it, they just say, oh, I'm just not a math person. I can't do this. And this is pretty common. You see this in students all the time. Okay, so how does this apply to magic? I think it applies incredibly heavily to magic. And, maybe I'll start by shouting out your always improving hashtag, because that is one of the more growth mindset things I've ever seen in Magic. This kind of idea that we are here constantly improving. It's not about, when you go to a tournament, it's maybe not just about that tournament. It's about the growth that you experience through that tournament. It's about what you learn. It's about your experience applying things to the next tournament. We both talked about how our last place finishes have inspired future results. Admittedly, my last place finish was my last Pro Tour, and my next one's coming up. So fingers crossed that
you're just gonna snap off your first topic. That's fine.
Yeah, that would be amazing, obviously. But yeah, I think another one that I see in Magic all the time, I feel, especially in competitive events, people feel this constant need to be right, especially in conversations about Magic. Like, people will get really vocal and animated when talking about deck choices or picks in limited, and you can often tell that like these people just care so much about them being the one who's right. They're the loudest voice. They want everyone to be like, oh my god, so and so was so right about this uncommon. It is the best uncommon in the set. I should pack one, pick one at every time. Like, it's not about learning. It's not about getting better. It's about being right and proving that you are right. And in a way, this is a really kind of fixed mindset, growth mindset issue of, if your mindset is fixed, you're kind of you're stuck where you are. You need to prove that you are good enough. And with a growth mindset, you don't need to be good enough now. You can develop and you can grow and you can become good enough. You can become better than good enough as you kind of allow your mindset to shape in that way.
I think that, just as you're talking, the number of times that somebody says, I'm an aggro player, or I'm a control player, or I'm a this player, I'm like, man, that's a weird box to put yourself in, because you're a Magic player. And like, if you want to be the best Magic player you can be, don't put yourself in that box. It's kind of like what you said about the math thing, like, oh no, I'm more of a science guy, or an English guy. It's like, well, you can be a person who enjoys that thing, and maybe that's your favorite thing, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn those other things.
Yeah. And shout out to Limited in general. I'm someone who came from Limited to Constructed, but Limited really helps develop these skills because, if you consider yourself an aggro person, you think you're really bad at control, and you go to a sealed tournament, guess what? Like, you're going to get the pool you get. And sometimes you'll open an incredible control deck, and you kind of have to learn on the fly. And, you could say, ugh, I'm only good at aggro. I'm just going to build a terrible aggro deck and then you lose, or I had to build a control deck and then I, O2 dropped because I'm so bad at control. Or you could build the best deck and give it an honest go and try your best. I think I don't want to be too, ingenuine and on a soapbox here about, people like this, because we all know lots of people like this. And, I do think often this isn't that people aren't trying to do well. It's that they're kind of unknowingly letting their mindset get in the way of success.
I also think that sometimes it's the easier route, right? And our brains are just wired to want to do things the easier way, especially if we have success in those things, right? And then it's also the same way when we have failures in those things. That it's like, oh, well, that didn't work, so your brain says don't do it.
Yeah, it's part of the proving yourself too. You 3-0 a draft with red white aggro, and then you're like, oh my god, red white aggro is so good in this format. And then you kind of you're like, this is my thing. I'm going to be the red white aggro drafter. And instead of kind of trying to learn more and see what that teaches you about the format, you can kind of pigeonhole yourself. And then if red white isn't open, you can run into some problems.
I gotta ask, how does this, we could probably go on about what it is, probably for like 45 minutes. But I gotta ask, when did you feel like, and you might have already answered this talking about your background, but when did you feel like you started applying this to Magic?
I was actually like at a math education training where it was like a bunch of math teachers learning, and this is when I was first exposed to this. And I remember like literally being in the back of the room and being like, huh, like this all applies to Magic too. Like I was kind of in the time, I think I had some tournament that weekend, so I was kind of like at the training, but I was kind of thinking about Magic a little bit. And kind of as they were talking, I was like, huh, like I have had some unhealthy attitudes towards Magic recently. I was kind of going through a spiral where I wasn't doing very well, and I was kind of like, I think like exactly what they're saying my math students are experiencing about math is what I'm currently doing about Magic, and I think that was pretty enlightening. Just a kind of light bulb moment.
This is literally how always improving happened. I was at work, and it was our motto at work. It was always be improving at a startup that I worked at. And I was like, I'm stealing this. This is going to be my pod. Like, we were maybe, I don't know how many episodes into the podcast, but I'm like, this is what my podcast is about. And I think that one of the reasons that Magic is so cool is because so many times we find those things in real life, in our careers, in our education, that apply, and it happens in reverse too, right? Like you learn a system of magic in Magic, and you get to apply that elsewhere. Did you find success again after that conference?
I mean, I definitely, I don't know, everyone's, I don't exactly remember when this was, and I don't know, everyone's Magic careers has ups and downs, but I do think, relating to kind of our talk earlier about nonsense and this talk, a lot of times I found that my best Magic success comes when I don't want to say when I'm not expecting it, but when I'm not really anxious and really feeling like I need this win. It's when the rest of my life is going pretty well and I'm in a good mood and I'm in a good place socially. And those I found are kind of when the tournament wins happen. And I think that those are all related, kind of positive attitudes, growth mindsets, I think are all very related, all interconnected. One thing I want to point out so we don't get too pigeonholed on the same topic that I wanted to say on this is I think a key part, I talked a little bit about in Magic kind of people feeling the need to prove themselves and be the loudest person in the room. I was listening to one of your recent episodes preparing for this, and I noticed that Sky talked a lot about on their Pro Tour team how good the communication was. Just how everyone was so good at communicating and clear at communicating, and I was shocked by that because I've been on some Magic teams in my life that aren't that great at communicating, where people are kind of always talking over each other and people are kind of always wanting to be the right one and not really listening to other people's voices. Not my current teammates, huge shout out to Team System Magic and the crew, but I've seen that a lot in Magic, and it was interesting to hear them talking about Team Channel Fireball, who are some of the best minds of the game, really prioritizing kind of clear communication through their testing process. And I think it's not a coincidence that, this team of excellent players really, are good at both communicating clearly, but also taking a step back and listening to what other people have to say. And that really stood out to me.
I think back to an episode we did with Nathan Stoyer, and his comments on wanting to become a better teammate and how he didn't feel like he was always the best teammate. And it's for that reason of like, there's something so different about winning a game of Magic than helping others be the best Magic players they can be. There are different skill sets, and I think that sometimes we don't recognize them as such. And it actually leads me to we're going off show notes, by the way, because I'm really enjoying this conversation, because I want to ask you, how do you think that people can find those moments where they're in a fixed mindset when they're not always improving?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of what I said before, but the first thing that jumps to my mind is in Magic, in conversations about Magic, be sure you are taking a step back and listening. I have found I'm not someone who plays a ton of Constructed. I feel like am often kind of under-practiced compared to friends and teammates, and I found it really valuable to be able to step back and say, okay, I've done some testing, but not as much as everyone in the room. I'm going to step back. I'm going to listen to what everyone has to say. I'm going to hear their ideas. I'll chime in if I really feel strongly about a point, but kind of that skill that I gained just from my kind of lack of constructed experience relative to limited, I think is a really excellent way to kind of challenge yourself. Like, okay, next time I'm having a big conversation about deck lists, if you're someone who feels who is often dominant in those conversations, I would encourage you to just experiment with taking a step back and kind of listening to what other people have to say. Now, it's not always good advice. Not everyone and not every piece of advice you'll ever hear is a banger, and it's part of your job to filter out what people say that you agree with and what you disagree with. And you don't have to comment, if someone's like, oh, I always take this common, I think it's red's best common in the set, and you disagree, you just, you can let them know, or you can just, not take it and ignore their advice.
That's a separate skill. That's a skill that
yeah,
I've had to learn really hard. It's so funny that we talk about this because behind the scenes for the podcast listeners, I wasn't, and sometimes I'm still not always like this. I think that if you listen to the podcast enough, you know that I'm like a loud, excited, vocal person. And that also came with its own bag of like learning to listen is something that Magic taught me. And learning to okay with being wrong is something that Magic taught me. And I think that if you're not willing to be wrong, it's really hard. And, there are podcasts that might point to, like, Gray Merchant of Asphodel, like, Spencer, are you willing to be wrong? And I would say that card sucks, and the Underworld Connections was the real good card. But, yeah. I think that's a deep cut, by the way. I do think that there's, like, this level of, in coaching, I often will bring up the idea of the 5 whys. And, like, if you're not good at listening, and you're not good at asking questions, and you're not good at understanding what people are saying, or you want to challenge somebody's ideas, there are ways to do it that aren't combative. And you have to do that if you're going to have a growth mindset, because if you're combative, they're not going to enter that mindset with you. And it's going to shut down that communication that Greg was talking about.
Here's another thing. As I was kind of researching some tidbits about fixed mindsets and growth mindsets for this podcast, one thing that popped up on a list of things that people with a fixed mindset might experience is I said something along the lines of like not like feeling threatened by other people's success, or not being able to revel in your kind of friends and partners and teammates' success. And that one jumped out to me as something that I have kind of felt both in Magic. Like, I think we've all had the experience of going to a Magic tournament and seeing one of our friends win it, like an RCQ, and you're like really happy for them, but also you're like, I really wanted to win this one. Like I thought I had the right deck, and like, you're happy for your friend, but like also there's some kind of internalized jealousy there. And I think jealousy is an emotion that can get tied in with a fixed mindset. And I found that there are times in my Magic career where that would happen, and I would be like jumping up and down. I'd be like, oh my God, my friend won the tournament. Like, this is great. And I wouldn't even be thinking about myself. And there are times where I would feel a lot of jealousy towards my friend. And I think that is something that if you're kind of hearing this conversation and unsure where you might stand, this might be a bit of a litmus test to think about, like, how do you feel when your friend wins the tournament that you were in?
That is really beautiful, because some of my very happiest moments in Magic are my friends winning old school PTQs. Like, there was such a feeling of being in the car ride home with somebody who won a PTQ, and the whole car being happy. That I really appreciate you sharing that. I don't know how, there are certain times where I have been like not the best friend or teammate in situations, but I can honestly say that like some of my happiest moments in Magic are not my success, but actually I remember specifically former host of the show, Casey Bloodworth, sitting on my couch playing his RCQ online with my green-red deck and winning, and I think I told this on the last episode actually, but it is forever cemented in my brain as like one of the happiest. He had gotten so close, top in so many PPQs, and it was just like I was so much happier for him than when I qualified for my first Pro Tour. And it's like, I don't know. Why do you think that is? What is the? Maybe we don't have the answer, but I'm kind of curious.
Yeah.
Like, are you the same? Like, do you have those moments that like your friend succeeds that are like bounds above where you have been happy?
100%. I mean, okay, you asked me about my my Pro Tour results for this, and I think you just wanted to know which ones I'd played, but I sent my records, and the only one I had to look up was Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. I did not remember my record at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica because one of my best friends won the tournament. This is the one Andrew won.
I actually pulled it up when you said that because I was like, what's so funny is I pulled that Pro Tour up specifically because I was like, wait a second, didn't Andrew win this Pro Tour?
Yeah, it was such an amazing experience. We all so many of our friends stayed up all night testing the match he was going to play in top 8 to help him out. And when he played the finals against LSV, who's arguably the most popular Magic player of all time, and there was a room full of people cheering, and there were 500 people, and 497 of them were cheering for LSV. And me and my friend Sam and one other friend were loudly cheering on Andrew, and we challenged ourselves to be as loud as LSV's fans, even though there were so fewer of us. And it's really funny because if you go back and watch the broadcast, you can hear us. Whenever Andrew wins a game, you hear 3 distinct voices. One of them is mine, yelling at the top of our lungs for Andrew. And it was, and then we got to all run up to the stage when he won. And I think that is my best Magic memory, was Andrew winning the Pro Tour. That's probably just number one. But
I gotta ask.
But yeah, but I do just want to acknowledge because there are many people listening to us, and I just have had the other thing happen too. Usually at lower stakes tournaments, honestly. Usually if my friend wins a PT, I'm not going to be that jealous. But back in the PPTQ days, you show up, it's a 15-person PPTQ, and you have a bad day and your friend wins the tournament. You feel great, but there's some jealousy there usually, and I think it's actually healthy to acknowledge when you feel that, and kind of work to move past it and kind of be honest with those feelings that you're feeling. Because I don't want people to listen to this, and if you feel jealous for your friends, to say, oh no, I can't, don't push those feelings away, acknowledge them, and try and grow from them.
I did a podcast on faking positivity once for this show, where I talked about sometimes it's important to acknowledge your feelings, but fake it for yourself, to be you're gonna know if you're faking it, right, for your friends, and you're faking it for X or Y, and using that as a tool is really important. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to spiral, and because spiraling is I'm not talking don't get toxically positive, that's a whole nother issue. But you have that problem. I had that problem. It's actually why it's why I left the show for a little while. It became too much. It was toxically positive about things that when I was not happy, and I think that there's a balancing act there. I gotta ask, why do you think this idea works? And I just want to acknowledge something actually before you answer this question. This doesn't just come from education. This is in corporate America, because they love finding things that motivate people to get better, improve the workers. But it's not just there either. You see it in product management, in product design, in my field of software development, and understanding how do we make the best software, how do we make the best hardware, and how do we come up with the best ideas. And that type of think chamber, they've realized, happens through this type of stuff. But I'm kind of curious, Why do you think it works?
I mean, if you feel good, you play better. I think that, you know, having not being stuck in unhealthy emotions can help you feel better. And I think when you feel better, you play better. I think when you feel better, you do school better, you teach better, you do things at work. I think a lot of, sometimes we like to pretend that our emotions don't tie into everything we do. And I think that's just wrong. And so I don't know. I wish I had a more complicated answer than that. I probably could think of one, but
No,
I think
I think you're right. A lot of people ask me, Spencer, why have you gone to so few RCs this year? Like, why have you played in so few RCQs? You live in Utah, you get like 16 to 20 RCQs a season. You play in 3, and I'm like, yeah, I had a really hard year. I don't play good Magic when I have a hard year, or when I have a hard time, and like, I think that it's okay to not be okay. But what you should do is not force yourself to, I don't know, be in a position to have to have that positivity, have to be what you're not. I really appreciate you coming on, and I really appreciate this topic. I was telling my wife today that like I feel the best that I have felt in a long time, and last night I can't believe I'm talking since I had a dream that I top 8 at the Pro Tour, and I have not had a dream about the Pro Tour in probably 8 years.
wow, that's yeah. I don't know. That's awesome. I am really glad to hear that that things are better. When I queued for my first PT, I was talking to the therapist I was seeing at the time, and and Magic was causing me a lot of stress. It came up at a lot of our sessions. I was like trying to go to PPTQs. I couldn't win one that season. I was really upset about it. All my friends were playing the RCQ. They were all going to go to this cool thing that I didn't get to go to. I was pretty sad about it. And then I just kind of told my therapist that like this is causing me a lot of stress. I'm gonna set this goal down. I'm gonna not do this anymore. I'm gonna and I meant it. I genuinely was like, I don't know why I need to go to the Pro Tour. Like that sounds fun, but like it's not. So I'm putting this huge burden on myself, and I don't need to do that. And I meant it. I pretty genuinely went to that tournament and with kind of a I don't know, things felt lighter. I didn't feel this pressure. I'd kind of let this pressure go, and then I queued for the PT. Then I top 8'd my first GP. Huh?
Did you at least tweet
I didn't tweet it. No,
you gotta.
I didn't tweet it.
You gotta tweet it.
Retirement isn't the right word. I wouldn't say I was like planning to retire. I still wanted to play. I just wanted to prioritize enjoying myself and not this kind of goal that was causing me stress. Here's another fun story that I wanted to tell as we were discussing this. So also about my first ever Pro Tour. It was in Bilbao, Spain, the only Pro Tour I played internationally. And I stayed in a house with about 10 people who were all playing the Pro Tour. And I was so excited to be in Spain. And I was like, I looked up all this touristy stuff, all these museums, all these restaurants, all these bars, this like day trip that we could do that was a day away. I was so excited to just like enjoy being in Spain. And we get to the thing and I'm like sharing this with the whole group. And they're all like, Greg, we're going to sit in the room and play Magic all day for the whole week to prepare for the tournament. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's totally fine. I'm going to go do all these travel things. And two people in the group decided to come with me. And so our group of 10 was split into what all people affectionately called Team Fun and Team No Fun. And I was the captain of Team Fun. And we like went out for tapas every night and saw the city and went on this day trip. And 4 people in the house made day 2 of this Pro Tour. All 3 members of Team Fun made day 2. And 1 out of 7 members of Team No Fun made day 2 of this Pro Tour. I'm not saying testing for Magic is bad. I think you should test the appropriate amount to make yourself feel comfortable. But I also think, spending 12 hours every day in a room doing nothing else but playing Magic might not be quite as good of testing as you think it is. And obviously, different things work for different people. I don't want to criticize anyone, but I want to share my experience that for me, the best thing I could do to do better at this Pro Tour was not to be in that room grinding matches and matches. It was to enjoy this amazing trip to Spain that I'd gotten for free as part of the Pro Tour and then play the best Magic I could after a really fun week.
That is how we're going to end the show. So, Greg, I loved having you on, and I knew that I would, but I just want to say thank you so much. Well, if you want to join the conversation, head on over to the Patreon, join the Patreon Discord. We also have a public Discord. We have, by the time the show's up, you still, no, you probably can't get into fantasy or March Madness in that Discord. But, you know, if you like what we do here at Heezy Media, whether it's, you know, drafting archetypes, constructive criticism, the Smash podcast, the Nerd Culture podcast, it's a great Discord to find other like-minded people. If you leave a YouTube comment this week, one puppy will be saved from euthanization. So, you know, subscribe, like, comment. That's how it works. And then don't forget to check us out on Twitter at CCMTG. Where do people find you, Greg?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I absolutely loved talking with you, and this was a ton of fun. I am by no means an expert on any of these things, but I loved chatting about them with you, and I hope you found these conversations helpful. Tons of resources if you want to learn more about them in the future. As for finding me, I am on Twitter at neverbole. That's never BOLE, short for hyperbole. That might be changing soon, so you can also check me out on Twitter /SystemMagicMTG. That's the Twitter for my Twitch stream. You should come watch my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/SystemMagic. Let us know in the chat if you came from this podcast. We would love to see you there. Be sure to comment in the chat. We will be playing a lot of Limited, a lot of Standard, a lot of Modern, a lot of Pioneer. Everything is exciting right now. So we have tons of great streams in the near future.
They are own one against the CCMDG account on Arena, though.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We did get paired up against you once, and we lost in a Standard. It was like Esper against Red Black Midrange or something.
No, I was Red Black. You guys were Domain, actually.
Oh, that's right.
And it was like the craziest game of Red Black Midrange I had ever played. I was like, I cannot believe I'm going to win this match. It was nuts.
Yeah.
I want to say that I enjoyed the stream and actually learned about it because of that match. And because podcast listeners were like, hey, you were on this stream. We thought you played really well. And also they thought that you played really well. And I got to go back and watch it. And I fell in love with the stream because of that. So, I don't know. I think you guys are so positive and fun and honest, unapologetically yourselves, which I think is so important in content creation. And I really like it when people get to be unapologetically themselves.
Yeah, so. Thank you so much. That is very, very kind.
I'm so serious.
We have a great time. We mostly just try and have fun, and we found that our content is the best when we're having a great time. It ties into everything we've been talking about. You know, you play Magic the best when you're having a good time. You podcast and Twitch stream the best when you're having a good time. And so
you can find me at Heezy Game. You can find me every week on the Need Your Nerd podcast, a podcast about nerd culture. This week we've reviewed season 2 of Witcher. You can also find me every month on another always improving podcast about Smash Bros. We do it monthly. We did miss last month because of my illness, but we will be posting a pretty important episode coming up here. You can find Abe at More Nothings on X or Twitter, and you can find Mason at Mason E. Clark. I'm not sure either of their coaching availability right now, but you can reach out to them in their DMs, and then Mason, you would reach out to masonclark@gmail.com and use the title coaching in your header. What did you learn on this week's podcast, Greg?
You know, I remember when I talked about when I kind of talked about growth mindset and how I introduced it to my Magic world, and I remember sharing a conversation with a friend about it, and it being kind of unique. They were like, "Oh, that's cool," and I remember talking to some of my education friends and being like, "I'm going to apply this to Magic," and they were like, "Oh, that's cool." And at the time, I don't know, this was like 6-7 years ago. It felt really novel, and what I've absolutely loved about this process is not only hearing your experiences, which I think really closely align with mine, but also, you know, through the always improving mantra, that the experiences of your co-hosts and probably many, many of your listeners also align with this. And I think that kind of this way of thinking is building itself into Magic, and it fills me with so much joy because I've seen the Magic community be great and I've seen it be toxic, and I think that focusing on improving our mindsets is one of the best things we can do to help our community not be toxic, just kind of in general. And so I've left this podcast feeling really optimistic about the competitive Magic community.
That makes me really happy. I learned that you once had an insane ELO rating in Magic. Like, absolutely banger ELO rating. And, like, getting above 1800 in, like, the ELO project is, like, pretty tough, Mr. 2054 at one point or something.
I did cash my first, like, 5 GPs or something, which is a pretty insane stat. So that really helped my ELO.
And then you top hated your next one or something?
No. I had a big dip, and then I dipped back up to when I top hated.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening, and we'll talk to everybody next week on another episode of Constructed Criticism.